It's time to be woke. Take off your shades. It helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the song, we out here, yeah. Spitting the...
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. You made it. It's Friday. Yay! Congratulations. You get to enjoy a weekend in isolation. Well, at least if you live where I am. Anyhow, we have a jam-packed show for you today. We are going to be talking further about the Middle East crisis, for lack of a better term, the extermination of the Palestinians on the Gaza Strip and the events that are leading up to these things, and the latest that we are now hearing that a ceasefire is being brokered by Egypt. And of course, we're going to be getting into that too. And that begins with the introduction of my lovely and talented co-host, Ms. Kerri Barber. Good morning, Kerri.
Hey, Andy. Good morning. Good morning to everybody tuning in. It has been a very rough week. There was some debate about whether we were going to do this show, and I was watching corporate news, watching Western media, even watching on the left. A lot of the shows had, the situation was egregious. It was horrific. Opinions. There were very few people who were doing facts and historical data. So that's why we're doing this show. So the whole point of this one today is dispelling some myths, pushing back on some things that I have personally witnessed, that other journalists have personally witnessed. I just want to say there was a journalist that I was following, working with over this past week. I found out earlier he's passed away. His family was part of the targeting, and so I'd like to dedicate this to him and to the other journalists in Gaza right now who are still struggling to get the word out and to provide documented evidence. So what I'm bringing to you today is fact-based evidence. I have a ton of links for the historical pieces, and then any graphic that I am showing you, I have personally gone through the metadata to make sure that it is, number one, from this particular conflict, now that this photo was taken where they said it was taken, and I have vetted the sources as best of my ability. I have a ton of contact that I didn't have that kind of time to bring that, but this is the level that we're trying to go to. And as we go through this broadcast, you'll understand why. So if you are another person on the left or a progressive podcaster, this broadcast is intended for you. Please take this information, steal it, do whatever you got to do. Don't need us, don't credit us, it's so important that we get this right and that you understand it, because just merely expressing your opinion, nobody cares. Nobody really cares, right? We all share that opinion. What we need you to do is act like journalists in this moment and educate and credible sources. So please take all of this, run with it, because you're going to need it. So
Absolutely. That's such an important point, Kerri. The stuff that you're going to hear from us in the next hour is all factually based, right? Despite what you are told from any of the platforms that we broadcast to for whatever propagandized reason, this is 100% unbiased reporting of what's happening in the Middle East. So that's our disclaimer. Now, whether or not it gets to you, that's another story. but at least to the best of our ability, we've done our homework and our due diligence, and that's what you're going to see today.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to cover. And when I get to a point where it's my opinion, you'll definitely know it's my opinion. So
Yeah,
all right.
the veins in your forehead kind of stick out a little.
Yeah, I can't play poker. I know it. I've never had a good bluff. So all right, let's get started. Andy, first graphic, treaties broken. So this is, I've characterized all of this in an outline based on the major themes of misinformation that I have seen coming out from official sources, as well as the paid trolls are out there. So I'll get to who those trolls are and who they're being paid by a little bit later, but this content is organized under these themes. So the first one is Israel has always existed and will always exist. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. So you can go back to biblical pieces, and I'm going to cover that too. But when we look at the map of the world, it's changed throughout history. We had, the Prussian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, Genghis Khan, all of these different territories and countries that no longer exist. They've morphed, they've changed, borders change. And one of the big arguments in justification for this past week has been Israel has a right to exist. No. People have a right to exist. Countries do not. What countries have to do is they have to go before the global community and ask to be recognized as a sovereign nation, right? That's how it works. We have laws between all of these different nation states. Whether it's a nation state who's trying to take over a colony, they have to get permission from others to do this. So this first map, I thought that this is really interesting because there was a piece on here that I did not know. And living in the United States, Western media didn't report on this. So this is the deal that the Trump administration, you remember Jared Kushner? The fifth map over here is the deal that Trump and Kushner were working on for a settlement. I've never seen that map before. So if you have, kudos to you. You were one up on me. But this map gives you a depiction of the territory that was given to Israel by the colonized, they were colonized, or Britain had colonized the area known as Palestine. Palestine, not Israel, not whatever. It was this area called Palestine, and the British came in, as they did with most of the continent, most of the world, claimed it as a colony. They conquered it, claimed it as a colony. So as of 1917, the green was all Palestine. And then you go into 1948. This was after, so any of you who have done even slightly paid attention during history class, World War II, you recall that Hitler in Germany had a final solution. Why did he call it the final solution? He was trying to expel Jews out of Germany and Austria, and no country would take them. Britain said no, US said no, Canada said no. All these other countries said no. So he's like, well, screw it. This is our final solution. I am glossing over that section. It is horrific, and it should have been the final lesson that humanity needed, but apparently we don't get it. So here we are yet again. So 1948, Britain decided, hey, we're going to give this land to the Jews, and we're going to just take the Palestinians and put them into these tiny little green areas. And then in 1967, there was another skirmish, and you could read all about that and how that happened. 1995, the Oslo Accords. These are really important. So this was under Big Willie Clinton and a few other key leaders. Egypt always plays a role in this. So thank you, Egypt, for helping out and making sure that there's power and the Palestinian people get a voice in all of this. So under the Oslo Accords, this is where Israel started to break their promises. So you had Oslo 1 and Oslo 2, and you can go and read the details about it. But Israel is the one who has been breaking the agreements, not just with Palestine, but with the rest of the world. So I wanted to definitely push back on that myth that it's Palestinians or whatever the boogeyman is, PLO or Hamas or whoever they come up with. No, this was Israel who was breaking these treaties. And then the other part that I thought was really, really important is going back to the laws and agreements that we have as nation states and having to ask to be recognized as a sovereign nation. This happened for both Israel and Palestine. And that's a big, big legal framework that people have missed. So as of July 2019, this is obviously ongoing, but July 2019, 138 of the 193 UN members have recognized Palestine and their right to call themselves a sovereign nation, including Israel. Israel had 164 members recognize their right to become a nation state, and that's again out of the 193 members. So who was the first leader of Israel to recognize Palestine? I remember this guy, but I'm older. In 2001, it was Ariel Sharon. Ariel Sharon was the first one, the head of the government in Israel, to say, yeah, this is the solution to the peace. He was obviously very much in for the two-state solution. Palestinians get their state, we get our state, we will learn to live together. And at that time, there weren't walls and barbed wire. You had villages with the Israeli Jews living next to Palestinian Jews and Palestinian Muslims. And yes, there are Jewish Palestinians. And they were getting along fine. That wall didn't happen until a little bit later. Again, that was in 2009. That's when things started to really heat up. And that was when Netanyahu came in. So Netanyahu is a hardliner. Typically, I grew up, we called him a conservative, a right wing. Now, dude is alt-right.
Yeah,
absolutely alt-right.
Neoconservative all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is when things really started to change and heat up. So you had Israel recognizing it in 2003. They said, yep, absolutely, Palestinians, you have this place, you are autonomous, and we are going to help you. And there was a whole plan. And this was under George W. Bush. Was it George W.H.? The younger Bush. The younger Bush.
The younger Bush.
Yeah. Under him, he actually brokered agreement again with Jordan and Egypt. Thanks, guys. You guys are awesome. They were going to have a whole plan where by 2005, Palestine was going to have their own airport and their own port at the sea. We were on the path. And then in comes Netanyahu. And then you can see what was happening time and time again after he came in, and now he's back, and it's just so this is kind of the shit show that is going on. So I included the links. If anybody freaks out and says no, Israel has never recognized Palestine, yeah they have. I've got the link. It's to the Guardian. They covered it, really nice pictures, what the deal covered. So please take that, read it. Okay, so that's how that happened. So Andy, let's go on to the next one. What happened whenever, one side or the other started to lose their shit? So I'm not going to lie and say the PLO was innocent. They weren't. But I think that this next graphic shows. So thank you to Al Jazeera to putting this particular one together. But I think this next graphic shows what the disparities really were through all of this time, right? So 2008 going forward, we're talking about this is now Gaza and the Palestinians who are, this is the beginning of the creation of the open air prison where they're locked down, they can't leave, they've got to have papers to go to a job. If they cross into out of Gaza, just all of these conditions that must be met, and any products and services that come into Gaza, some are outright banned, some are searched. All of this is happening right now. And during this time from 2008 to the present, you can see it's just not a fair fight. And if you saw the statement that Trevor Noah put out, I thought it was kind of a silly example, but it really made sense. He was talking about, I was a teenager and my brother was 4, and toddlers can be pretty vicious. And he said, when my brother would come at me, I really wanted to hurt him. He said, it was my mother who always stopped me and said, look, you can crush him. You're big. You're a teenager. You're grown. You can't. He's so little. He's so little. And I know he's angry and he's upset, but you just can't. And here is the example of a very powerful military who's backed by some of the world's top powers, top technology. And then you look at the Palestinians, right? So this is what the historical casualty count has been. And this is why, Amber brought it up, that right now today, the median age in Gaza is 17 years old. This is why we've been killing them off for years.
Right.
Absolutely.
And if you recall, Kerri, right around the time when Kushner and Ivanka were in Israel, and Trump announced to the world that they were recognizing, was it Jerusalem as the capital?
Yeah.
I think that not 2017.
Yes.
And we started to actually see, in at least our side of the media, the casualties, the brazenness of the Israeli soldiers that were firing on innocent civilians, and the atrocities that were just starting to happen there. I think that was a real turning point in terms of media and attention, at least on our side of the aisle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like, and this is where I would defer to the journalists who are there to ask them that question, but I feel like that's when we started to get a sense of something has seriously changed here. So you may be right on that. So then, now that we've kind of set up the context, and by no means is this comprehensive, I would encourage you to go out and do your own reading on this one, but just set the tone for where we have been now for the last 8 days. So this is the next graphic, if you wouldn't mind, Andy, where we are now. And I want to remind everyone that this is the latest data that was current as of the 16th of May. These numbers will go up significantly, and I'll get to why those numbers are going to go up. First, we still have bodies buried under rubble, so we don't have a set count right now. This is the numbers that were confirmed, and you can see the significant portion of children who were injured and died. And the reason for that is Israel bombed homes, apartment buildings, and schools. And so if we're going to forward an argument based on legality, that that Israel has a right to exist as a nation, then you must also look at the laws that they're supposed to adhere to. Bombing an apartment building, no, you violate just about every international treaty. Bombing a school, that's a war crime. That is what you hang for. That's a capital crime. Targeting civilians is a war crime. You hang for that, or at least you're supposed to. So what we have seen over time and time again, you see people parroting this on social media and official news. They're all saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. And I have to tell you that international journalists on the ground who are not Palestinian journalists, they're saying no to to all of that. And I did include some links in that, and I want to share those with you. Some of them in just a minute, but yeah, there's a reason why this death toll is so high. And when we get back to the technology of what's being used here, there are a couple different munitions that are being used by Israel. And I think at this point, it's no secret that they're getting the majority of those weapons in a package deal from the United States, some from France, Germany, and Britain, but mostly from the United States. And what is so telling about these particular casualty numbers is, all right, so you have, let's say, Hamas kludges together a rocket. They smuggle in parts, they put it together. They're very clever, very, very smart. They put something together. Israel is using a kit that is manufactured to take a regular bomb and make it a guided weapon, so that this particular bomb now is accurate within 7 meters. So you can drop it from really high heights and it will be accurate within 7 meters. So if you're targeting, for example, you know that Hamas is in this particular office building, you should be able to hit that office building. So then explain why they are in food factories. What is it? Jason said a mattress factory. Two
Yes.
schools. Yeah. The UN had hosted all of the refugees who had just been displaced from their apartments and their homes in 2 schools. They bombed those 2 schools. Why?
And an ice cream factory.
Yeah. Yeah. Restaurants.
Who the hell hates ice cream?
Israel. Well,
Apparently.
you know, I think when Jason was talking about, if you did not see the interview that we were so privileged to host with Jason, who talked about what has been going on. I mean, I didn't know that there was a prohibition they would ban toilet paper. I didn't know that they banned chocolate. I didn't know that they banned all of these sort of things.
And feminine hygiene products.
Right. And it's just cruelty. It has nothing to do with security. It's just cruelty. And when he talked about all of these things, and then watching them in real time bomb restaurants on the beach, and even Jason said it, he's like, they're trying to take away our memories. They're trying to take away anything good that we had here. So yeah, and I think the one message I saw from another journalist, he said it was the strangest thing, or he retweeted this from someone else. He said it was the strangest thing. My brother and I just traded children. I took one of his, he took one of mine. And the reason we did that is if my house gets bombed and I die, at least one of my children will have survived. And the same goes for him. That's what they're doing. And it has nothing to do with Hamas or security or any of those things. So this is, you remember when we said vote blue no matter who to save America because Trump is so awful? This is Netanyahu. This would have been our future under Trump and accelerated, or if we keep voting for the lesser evil, we're going to get this anyway. So that is my opinion.
Well, it's clearly it's a case of here, sign this arms bill of sale. Okay, just inspect that. All right, okay, now let's talk ceasefire.
And that's exactly right. So let's get into it. We're going through some of this pretty quickly, but I do want to, have some time to peel back on some other pieces here. But so let's talk about the weaponries. Andy, this is the thermobark weapons. So this is really where I have focused for the last week when I was looking at metadata on photos, on video, trying to ensure that what I'm looking at is current and the geolocation data was inherent. So all of this, I did not personally, but I am well aware of other journalists who were taking the information, the data, and providing this onto criminal courts, because a lot of the weaponry that was being used or alleged to be used These are all war crimes. You cannot use these against civilians. So it is a handy target to say Hamas, Hamas, Hamas while you're bombing a school. But the munitions that you're using have not only a dire effect in a civilian population, but also have a lasting effect in the area, right? So this is why they're war crimes. This is why if you are found guilty, you hang. There's no other prescription for it. You hang. So this is where I wanted to get into some of the munitions. So the first ones that we know that they were using for 5 days, because they're super cheap, super cheap. These are called GBU, Gordon Bradley Umbrella 31 and 39. They're known as Joint Direct Attack Munitions. These are the guided systems that I had mentioned, where you can take a regular munition and then add this kit to it. So those kits are made and manufactured here in the United States by Boeing Corporation. That is one of their biggest sales. So when you saw that the Biden administration was getting ready to put out another $800 million in a package deal, a lot of it was coming from this. When there was pushback because of that announcement, if you were watching Boeing stock at all, and I do because I own it, it dropped because of these munitions, right? So as of yesterday, there are two things that are happening. So I want you to make sure that you bookmark and go out to congress.gov. There were two resolutions that were introduced. AOC and some other folks introduced a House resolution to block that sale. And then Senator Sanders did a counterpart resolution in the Senate. Once again, if you watched our show, we've talked about you have to have a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate, and that is the fastest way to reconcile both of them and get it passed. So those two things have taken place as of now to block the $800 million in sales. That's one deal. That's just one deal. And a block does not mean cancel. So this is why I would like for you to go out to congress.gov, find these two pieces, and then there's a little button that you can push to be notified if things move forward. This is super important because the minute that we take off pressure and look away, it'll be back to business as usual. Typically is. So those were the first munitions that we saw. Now, there were other allegations, and I personally have not seen a confirmation of this, but the evidence was pretty compelling. White phosphorus has been unconfirmed, but we're seeing photos and images that are geolocation confirmed and date confirmed with injuries to children and families that look like white phosphorus. And some of the reporters had been talking about when the bombings were happening, their eyes and throat and skin were burning. I mean, just really uncomfortable, like they themselves were on fire and they were blocks away. So those also were being noted, taken down. Hospitals were documenting this. We do not have it confirmed yet, but white phosphorus. Okay, so for anyone who's not familiar with this, and I do want to give you a trigger warning for what I'm about to read to you on this one, but white phosphorus has been used by Israel in 2009, that was confirmed, in Gaza, and in 2013 after they denied it heavily, but both the UK and UN sources found evidence and found corroborating substantial evidence that they did it. Then they finally admitted they did it and said that it was done to thwart militants and was not used in a civilian setting. Gaza is nothing but a civilian setting. So they have been known to use it before. And the way that white phosphorus works is, you remember Agent Orange from Vietnam? All of that was banned, but white phosphorus is self-igniting. It's a self-igniting chemical that can burn at upwards of 4,800 degrees Fahrenheit once it makes contact with the air. So this could be something that is detonated right above the ground, and it just spreads out and covers everything within its path, including people. It covers surfaces, contaminants, you breathe it in. So it is a horrific weapon and a horrific way to die, which is why it has been banned in civilian areas. So this week we have a couple different reports and allegations that has been used. All right, so now to this particular slide. This munition, the irony is that this one, the thermobaric weapon, was designed and developed in World War II by the Nazis. It's a horrific weapon of war. And the Nazis, for those of you who study World War II, they were very much into chemical warfare. That is what they wanted to stick with. So this is right in line with it. And then this particular grade of weapon comes from Russia development. I'm not going to say that there aren't Western companies who are developing it, but it was purchased by from Russian sources. So this one, we have unconfirmed but pretty substantial evidence that this one is also being used. So Omar here, Omar is a journalist that I've been following. He is a credible journalist. He has won major awards. Dude doesn't lie, okay? So he's one of the journalists that I have been following. And he was the first one to report it. And this came out this morning, morning for me. But they were watching the airplanes fly over the bomb attacks, no noise, and then all of a sudden this huge explosion. So with this one, what it does is in the mix of the chemicals, there's no air in it. So I've heard about this before in Iraq being used and other things. It's part of the Bunker Buster series, I believe. And what it does is once it ignites and explodes, it pulls the air out of the immediate area. So from a U.S. Department, I forget which one this was. Hold on, let me get you the source. And I did include a link. U.S. Where is this one? Okay, U.S. DOJ and some military attaches studied this particular thermobaric weapon. I did include a link to their report, which the Human Rights Watch cited, and that's also on Wikipedia, but I found the original report. And the way they described it is the kill mechanism, meaning the explosion against living targets, is unique and unpleasant. What kills is the pressure wave, and more importantly, the subsequent retrification, which ruptures the lungs. That is the massive vacuum, instant massive vacuum that pulls the air out. It's pulling out from your ambient air as well as your lungs. And if the fuel deflagrates, that's a hard word, but does not detonate, victims will be severely burned and will probably also inhale the burning fuel. So again, it's a horrific weapon. It is a weapon of war. It is not meant to be used in a civilian setting, and nowhere in Gaza is there a military base. It is all civilian.
Imagine traveling in a spaceship through space and somebody opens the door and you're tossed out.
Yeah. That says with fire.
Yeah, well, with the fire too. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is another one that is so far unsubstantiated, but we're getting eyewitness reports on this one. So this is another one that I am going to bookmark and hold on to in the aftermath. Will there be an investigation? Will any of the criminal complaints that are going through the courts right now, will any of this evidence come up? And just one quick note on I didn't include the video here, but on the criminal courts, the Israeli government came out with a scathing condemnation of these criminal complaints, saying that Israel and Israeli citizens are not subject to these courts and will not be held to account, which is, it violates every global treaty that everyone has with Israel. So I was a little surprised to see that, and surprised that it was coming out on official Israeli media channels, because that to me, that's a screw you to the entire world, and could be considered an act of war if they decided to expand their operations, which they have. So one of the other points that is not coming out on Western media is that they have actually been firing upon Lebanese citizens on the Lebanese border, that is northern border. That is an act of war against protesters. And it doesn't matter what the protesters are doing. Those protesters aren't firing rockets, they're throwing rocks. And they're firing live munitions at those protesters in another foreign country. So that would be like a bunch of good old boys in Texas having a couple pups on the border of Mexico, and yeah, Mexico, we hate you, blah, blah. And the Mexico army lines up on the border and starts shooting them. That's the context. So that's what they're doing in Lebanon. So far, I haven't seen any excuse of Hamas in Lebanon. They're just shooting them. So that's another key point that I want to get out there. And then when it comes to their denial of what's going on, and by they, I mean Israel, there are a couple key points that I really need you to understand. And this is, I'm going to start with my opinion and my experience. I grew up in the U.S. State Department under the Diplomatic Corps. And there were two significant moments that have recently happened that have never happened in the history of the United States. Number one, when President Trump was elected, nearly the entire leadership of the U.S. State Department, our top diplomats, those are the people who are charged with intelligence, espionage, thwarting threats, with making sure all of our diplomats overseas in the USA Department, Voice of America, they're in charge of making sure everybody's safe. They're the first ones to broker peace. They're the first ones to broker expansion deals for corporations, all of these things. When you go to a consulate or an embassy and you need help, that's those guys. First time ever in the history of the United States, the entire leadership resigned.
They left the building.
Yeah. And I remember I nearly fell out when I heard that, but it didn't seem to resonate. And I'm like, maybe Americans don't understand what happens at U.S. State Department. Maybe they don't understand all the diplomats and their families overseas. Maybe they don't. So the second moment that I just about fell out occurred this week. And this was the head of the U.S. State Department. His name is Blinken, Blinken. He is a Biden official, the top diplomat, came out against the Biden administration and said openly, we see no evidence of Hamas to justify Israeli bombing of journalists in an apartment building. That has never happened in the history of the United States. And let me tell you why. Number one, it used to be, I remember this phrase, World War II-ish, a little bit after World War II, where the French ambassador had gotten intelligence from the US about a massive security breach. And they were trying to verify if it was true. And this French diplomat said, well, if it comes from the US, I know it's true. I know it's true. I don't have to doubt it. And that used to be our reputation.
Mm-hmm.
We lost that. We've lost it. So to see a US diplomat, not just a diplomat, but the highest diplomat that our country has, come out and say, I don't see any evidence. I have not been provided any evidence. Our people on the ground, and there are American diplomats on the ground, our people on the ground find no evidence to support what they're doing. What he is essentially saying is, I am putting my career on the line. I am putting my life on the line for the people under my charge who are giving me this information saying it's not happening. And I'm willing to do all of that and go against my boss who has just come out and said Israel is in the right.
Right.
So,
And including the fact that they are on the ground where this is happening and it's coming out and saying against the Israeli government, right?
yeah.
Who are bombing their enemies.
Right. And I just want to make this point clear. I don't think anybody is saying we hate Israel. We hate this behavior. This is unacceptable. So you're right, Andy. I can only imagine the diplomats who have been assigned to Jerusalem, been assigned to these areas. They have developed relationships, rapport. This is not only their business, but it's their life, right? And now I almost liken it to if you have a sibling, let's say it's a brother, who gets married and you get a call from your sister-in-law or whatever, gender non-specific, and their spouse calls you and says, your sibling has been beating me. They put my life at risk. What should I do? That's still your brother. It's still your brother, but it's painful. And I think that it's not a binary thing where it's either Palestine or Israel. And that's something I'm seeing a lot from these paid trolls is, well, if you don't support Israel, then you support terrorists. And that's not what we're saying at all.
Right. In the same vein as in the election, when people say, well, if you don't support Biden, you're voting for Trump.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we need to get out of that because that is costing us lives. And this is the point where we're at. So when Blinken said that, like I said, I don't know who else caught it, and I haven't seen it on Western media. So I did include a link. The only place that I could find it now, I bookmarked it, but then the only place that I could go out and find it today was on Haaretz, Haaretz.com, and it is true. It is credible. He actually said that. He said that. And then the other link that I put in there is a link to a Twitter account where a Reuters journalist in that moment, so Al Jazeera took the call that they got from Israel when the Israeli government says we're going to bomb your building, and they put it live on air. And I don't know that the caller knew that. So it was broadcast live. Al Jazeera has it. You can go and listen to it. And the caller was insinuating that the bomb was imminent. So you could hear the Al Jazeera reporters and the producers going, wait, you got to give us a moment. We will get out. We will vacate all of this. So it was Reuters journalists, Al Jazeera, and a number of other international journalists in this building. This is an office building and an apartment building. They were begging just an hour. And so the link that I included was a Reuters journalist, a cameraman, who was filming what was happening as this call is going on air. They're scrambling to get their equipment out, get people out, all of this sort of thing. So this is the aftermath of just the threat. And then, of course, we all saw the video. I hope you've seen the video now of that building coming down.
Yes, down. And it wasn't just like big bomb kabooey. And as Jason had described to us, that they were strategically taking out the support structures one at a time in the different parts of the building. But when you watch the footage, these were missiles that were very strategically placed, and they were taking down one part of the building, each at a time, right? So a missile would come in, almost like a controlled implosion. The one piece would come down, and then the next missile would hit the building on the other side and drop that part of the building. It was almost like a controlled implosion to get rid of the building.
Yeah, and those are the JDAM missiles that I had talked about, the GBU 31 and 39. So if you're at all curious, it's JDAM, JDAM. That's how they work. So you could see the strategic nature of the targeting in that moment. So when they say, oops, we didn't mean to hit that school or that house or what, they're lying. They're absolutely lying. Because yeah, you're right, Andy, absolutely. That video footage shows you the capability and just how accurate these things can be.
Well, and what is the point of hitting that building?
Media blackout,
Oh,
and
sure.
yeah, let's go to the next slide, and let's talk about why you would want journalists from all around the world not to be able to tell the story. This isn't the first time Israel has done it. It's not the first time we've seen it around the world, but this is why they took out the building, because in the past, Israel has had a very, very strategic, sophisticated propaganda campaign where they were taking facts and information and putting out what they wanted. And it was all against the PLO or against Hamas, the boogeyman, and they did this, and it worked. It worked really well. It didn't work this time. And the reason it didn't work this time is because we have social media, because journalists around the world, we know better. I mean, there's one of the few professions that you can have where you are now being targeted. It didn't used to be that way. You would go into a war zone and there was a significant risk, but now you are being targeted. If they see that lanyard, if they see journalism, if they see press, you will be shot. So journalists from all around the world are working together because this information is too important. Journalists themselves don't matter, right? Except to each other, their families. Um, but the story,
Democracy.
you would think, no, because I live in a country that is still pursuing Julian Assange. I live in a country who has credible, verified information of a journalist named Khashoggi, who was murdered. And my president said that's okay. So what does that mean for me, right? What does that mean? Yeah, so the one journalist that I mentioned that I had been following, there were two that went dark. Well, we don't know what happened to him. I was hoping. So this was Yusuf Abu Hussein. His house happened to be in that building where the Reuters office and Al Jazeera was. They targeted his apartment. So there are pictures there. And he was one of them. Like, I didn't know him personally. I knew him just through this particular story, and going back, who is this person? Is he credible? All of this sort of thing. But as you go through this week and you see them, just go dark. I haven't heard anything. What's going on? Is this person okay? Has he just lost power? Have they moved on? And then when I was doing research for the story today, I happened to find this particular article. So that was tough. That was really tough. So this is why journalism matters so much, because here's a couple examples. Here, I'm just talking about Yusuf, who died. There are others who have lost homes. Every one of the journalists that I talked to has lost family. All of them, family, friends. So at the top of this particular graphic, this is propaganda weapon. And the reason it's titled that way is there's this gentleman named Andrew Kerri who works for CNN. When I saw this information come out, it was a leaked email from this particular gentleman, Andrew Kerri, instructing CNN journalists on how to frame the stories. Now, keep in mind, I have been working with other journalists, and whenever we found something that was not legitimate, we would set it aside. Whenever we found information that was legitimate, okay, we're going to share that information. Some of the stuff that we found that was not legitimate was coming from Israel. They apparently don't know that header information, the header data still exists in video, and they were trying to show Hamas firing rockets to justify what they were doing. And we could see very clearly, and this has now come out, that it's from Syria. 2 years ago, Syria, different country, different time. So then to see a CNN journalist coaching on how to frame this, and this particular person sits in Jerusalem, and he's been there for a while. So he himself is trying to create propaganda narratives through CNN. And I blew up part of this email, and I've got a link where you can go and see the whole thing for yourself. But what he is instructing others to do is he says, we needs to be transparent. That was cute to start it that way. But he said, we need to be transparent about the fact that the Ministry of Health in Gaza is run by Hamas. Consequently, when we cite the latest casualty numbers and attribute to the health ministry of Gaza, we need to include the fact that it is Hamas. Why the fuck does that matter? First off, if you don't understand the political situation in Gaza right now, and the fact that the people themselves had called for an election, these are the Palestinians. And the leader of Hamas, this big boogeyman entity that is being used, refused to hold elections. So the Palestinian people were already pissed. They already wanted to oust him, already wanted to get some things done because they were not being helped, they were not being served. So why would a CNN reporter feel the need to post this information and encourage everyone to couch fatalities of children, of moms, of families, of doctors, as maybe you doubt it because Hamas? That guy should be fired. He should be fired and prosecuted. But I doubt it. Last I saw, he still works at CNN, and that was 3 hours ago.
Let's probably get a promotion for that.
Probably, or end up in the White House press secretary. So yeah, there's that.
Exactly.
So the other piece on this one, Reuters is pissed. They have been working double time to debunk a lot of this stuff after their building was blown up, and they knew it was a lie. So I posted a link where they themselves have been checking the video and the alleged photographs and evidence that is coming out as part of this propaganda campaign. And this is why good journalism matters, because not only do I don't know how other people do it, but I can't sit here and say, here's the information and no sources. I have to back it up. I have to back it up and say, here's the information that I have, here are the sources I have, unless like some of my people have asked me for information on Jason. I'm not. And the reason why is, if you need information, here's Yusuf. Yusuf was targeted for execution. So no, I'm not going to give you any detail, and this is why I did the interview with Jason in an encrypted manner. There's no way I would allow it to happen any other way. So that's the propaganda. So we got through most everything that I want to talk about except one. So we did the treaties and the maps, war crimes and human rights, and the munitions, and then the propaganda piece. There's one more that I want to talk about. So this is the other big thing, that the justification for genocide. One of the things that people were saying over and over again was about religion. So there's a point that I want to set aside for my friends who are atheists or agnostics. And I've seen you do this, particularly across social media and on Facebook for some reason. You are using this crisis and the context of religion in the exact same way the alt-right is using religion to justify genocide. And I need you to stop. And let me explain that. So I've seen a number of you post, well, what's going on over there, it gives you more insight that religion is the evil and we need to do away with religion. And that is the most egregious manipulative way to use this particular episode for your personal ideology. And again, it needs to stop. Absolutely. And I'm going to explain to you why, what you've got wrong and what the propagandists and the alt-right racist xenophobes have wrong. So let's go through the religious argument a little bit. And so for those of you who don't know, I'm a confirmed Catholic Christian. So in the religious context, you have Muslims, Christians, and Jews. In the Quran, in the Bible, and in the Torah, it's very clear. All three of these groups are family. Jews and the Muslims are our big siblings. And then you got the youngest of the group, the Christians, right? We don't get along, but we're family. And all three of these religious texts reiterate that point over and over and over. And I'm going to give you a couple examples. Number one, remember we talked about Egypt at the top of the show, and Egypt plays big into all of this. It's the central piece of all of these religions when it comes to this particular theme of a global family. So if you will now, church, open your Bibles up to Genesis 16. Genesis 16, even if you went to Sunday school or you're an atheist or whatever, you'll know this story. Abraham is the father of all three of these religions, right? He's the first one. So Abraham couldn't have kids with his wife Sarah. And Sarah was, based on Genesis, let's just call it out. She was a bitch, big time. And she was high maintenance. And she was up there in years and she was barren. But she had a handmaid, not necessarily a slave, but a handmaid, somebody who was subjected to her, had to take direction from her, named Hagar. Hagar was from Egypt. So in the story, Sarah says, Abraham, I know you really want a son of your own. Take, and I'm paraphrasing, I get that. Take Hagar. Maybe she'll give one for you. So, and I will raise it as my own. So he does. At the same time, Sarah is part of this miracle story. Sarah gets pregnant. Now Hagar's pregnant. And Hagar, firstborn of Abraham, is Ishmael. And then Sarah has Isaac. So Isaac, in these biblical texts, all three of them, the Quran, the Torah, and the Bible, you have these two sons. One becomes a progenitor of the Israelites. One becomes the progenitor of, anyone want to take a guess? Yeah. So from a religious context, even if you're an atheist, here is your pushback on this God gave Israel to the Israelites. No. God gave the blessing to Isaac and Jacob equally. And he told Abraham that they will, your offspring will be like all the stars in the sky, right? Jerusalem belongs to God and his family. And that is in those texts. So when it comes to this big religious argument and forwarding this and that, I truly have to blame bad teachers and propaganda. So I would ask our friends who are of no religion, agnostic, atheists, no. Now is not the time for you to forward your own ego and say religion is bad. We get that you're not part of that. That's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to fault you for that. But now is not the time to interject your ego in correcting a myth that is being used to kill people. What I would ask you to do is pick up maybe a Bible and read this, Genesis 16. And that is your pushback. And that is, that's all our job, to push back. If you have a Christian who is saying something using religion, their religion, in a horrible way, then yeah, we push back on that behavior. You do the same thing with our Muslim brothers and sisters. You do it with the Jews. And you can see this on a global scale, especially when you have the Orthodox Jewish global community pushing back on Israel. That's what we do. That's how we do this. And speaking as a religious person, we do this from a framework of love, like your mom did, right? Most moms. Uh, you do it from a framework of love, but absolutely, this is not okay, right? Your hard line, no, that is not okay, and you cannot make that case. So I wanted to put that piece of the religious context out there because I'm not seeing that anywhere else in detail or where you can find this, particularly for those of us who are not following this religious path. Here it is, Genesis 16. Have at it, read it, run with it, because we need everybody pushing back on that. This whole argument that, well, God gave it to Israel. No, he also took it away like 6 times too. So
what do
yeah,
Muslims and Christians and Jewish people all have in common? They're all human beings.
very good, very good.
We should remember that when we look at these events and understand that it's not the people that are trying to make those divisions. It's the leaders and the corporations that gain to benefit from us versus them. And that goes for everything that's wrong in the world right now.
Yeah, very well said, Andy. And I did the majority of the talking. Do you have any questions, Andy? Is there something that I did not cover sufficiently? Topic that I need to back up on?
No, I think you did a great job.
And I feel like I'm not even scratching the surface here based on just the volumes of content that have been shared across the journalism spectrum. And anybody who's been on the periphery catching little bits of it, please like and share it, because what we saw early on, and kudos to the shipping company in Italy, they saw it. They saw what we saw, and the dock workers and Italy would not allow this ship to leave port that was full of weapons bound for Israel. So this is why it matters, and this is why we have to share credible information. If you don't know where it comes from, or you don't trust that source, or you yourself are not a trustworthy source, being very careful. Just step back and maybe you let that one go. But this is why it matters for the people in Gaza. So
absolutely, this isn't meant. We only have an hour. This isn't supposed to be the end of the conversation. This is supposed to start conversations, right?
Right.
And when we start conversations with one another, whether we want to or not, we learn.
Yeah, and this is supposed to be a teaching moment for particularly everybody on the left in the United States. I hope that some of this information, some of the links, maybe there's something that really piques your interest and you want to pick it up and run with it and maybe expand on these. That is exactly what we need you to do, because as we saw, CNN ain't doing it, right? So yeah, fill the void.
Yes, and if you have questions, for God's sakes, ask them.
Yeah.
But ask credible sources.
Yes.
Not propagandized ones.
Yeah, exactly. And if you need some help figuring out what a propaganda source is, hey, we are all here to help you. There are thousands upon thousands of gray beard and gray haired journalists who will help you. So yeah, that's all I got. I'm exhausted.
And your day just started. Oh, that's great. Well, here, I think that this should be a 3-day weekend for you, Kerri.
It's not. We've got a big event coming up Saturday.
Yeah, I know, but that's going to be fun.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Right. Well, I'm going to make my section fun. Right. If you don't know what we're talking about, Kerri and I are both involved on Saturday with the U.S. Solutions Summit. And that is going to be starting at 4 p.m. Eastern and going to around 9 p.m. Eastern. And there are 6 sections, parts to that, where we're going to be talking to like-minded left-leaning. I guess the people from all kinds of different places, right? It's not necessarily just journalists and content creators. I mean, Justin Jackson's going to be there, football player, activist guy. Top with Jimmy Doran and Fiorella and Craig from Convo Couch and people from Heartlands Media. This is going to be a real good show, and it's called the Solution Summit because we're not just going to whine and complain about the problems and why everybody's mad as hell, and we're going to try to actually come up with some solutions. And maybe all our platforms together, we could get some people coordinating and starting to plan and starting to put some action items together, and we can move forward on these things, right? That would be great thing.
Yeah, we need a unified media space. Like, I don't have to agree with what's going on at Status Quo, which I normally do. But I don't have to agree, but I do need to support them because they're doing kick-ass work. So
yes, and I think last minute addition was Howie Hawkins, who of course he ran for the Green Party and for the presidential. And so, yeah, it's going to be a jam-packed event, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I hope we get a nice big audience that watches and listens and learns, and we can generate some motion forward instead of constantly feeling like we're moving in the wrong direction.
Absolutely, yeah, it's time to turn the tide. So on that note, I am all done. Enjoy the rest of your Friday. So. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Enjoy. You've worked hard this weekend. Take the weekend off. Put your feet up. The weather's lovely in most places in North America. And just make sure you have bug spray. Everyone take care. And we'll see you here bright and early on Monday morning.
We bout that, ayy. We in the zone. We out here, yeah. Speeding the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hammer the dog, we keeping it G.